Hey everyone, it's Mr. Drake. This video will go over the ins and outs of the document-based question, better known as the DBQ, in APUS history. This video has been revised for the 4th consecutive year because College Board keeps changing the rubric up, but this video will go over the very basics. So with that, let's get started. First, we'll talk about what the DBQ is and how it ties into your overall exam score in APUS history. We'll look at the new rubric very briefly and look at what it asks you to do in the essay. And we'll also look at the very basic outline of how you should organize a DBQ. We'll do a lot of outlines of DBQs in class, and you should reference this video and that outline for whenever you do that. The DBQ counts for 25% of your total exam score. The free response portion counts 40%, so the other 15% go to the long essay question. You have 60 minutes recommended to plan and construct your response. That's broken out as a 15-minute planning period to read the documents, get your thoughts together, and then 45 minutes to actually write the essay. That's only a recommendation. You get one large chunk of time to do the DBQ and the LEQ, so the 60 minutes is just a recommendation from the College Board in terms of their pacing. You also don't have to spend all 15 minutes planning. You can plan for 10 and then start writing if you want, but again, their recommendation is to spend 15 minutes planning. For those of you who've never done a history course before at the AP level, the DBQ consists of a question pertaining to something in history, and then 6 or 7 documents that go along with the question that you have to use and analyze to construct your argument. It's almost like you're writing a term paper, and those documents are in a way your evidence, like your sources that you're using as you construct that paper. The question will come from periods 3 through 8 in the APUSH curriculum, which means nothing before 1754 and nothing after 1980. So a lot of the early colonial stuff will not be asked about in the DBQ. It can be asked about in the short answer question or in the LEQ, and nothing from Ronald Reagan or after. So it'll kind of come in that sweet spot there that we'll spend the vast majority of the year covering. So with that, let's take a look at what the rubric actually requires you to do on the question. The DBQ rubric consists of 7 possible points that you can earn, and if you construct your DBQ correctly and do it well, the first 2 points should be in the bag before you even get out of the first paragraph. The first point you can earn, or should earn, is for what's called contextualization, which is where you describe a broader historical concept that is somehow relevant to the question that you were asked. This can be where you set the scene, for instance, and explain sort of like what's going on leading up to the time period you're being asked about, sort of, providing that, background for what's going on to make your answer make more sense. I've heard this referred to before as the Star Wars crawl. If you know at the beginning of a Star Wars movie, it'll give you that yellow type crawl across open space that explains what's been going on. That's what you should be doing with contextualization point. But it can't just be one sentence. It has to be pretty thoroughly explained. You're going to want to spend at least 2 or 3 sentences on that. Then comes your thesis, or what College Board now sometimes refers to as your claim, which is where you respond to the question with a defensible claim that establishes what you're going to argue and what your line of reasoning is. Okay, so you have to answer all parts of the question here. You can put this in the conclusion if you want, but I certainly don't recommend it. No matter where it goes, in the introduction or the conclusion, your thesis has to be in one place. Okay, it cannot be a distributed, holistic thesis that is just sort of like sprinkled throughout the essay. You have to put all of that in one spot, and it is always best to put it up front. As an APUSH reader, I can tell you that it is going to be a lot more likely that a reader is not going to catch your thesis if you sneak it into the conclusion. You can restate your thesis in the conclusion, and in fact, I'd encourage you to do so just to double back and cover all of your bases, but you should always up front put what it is that you're arguing. Next come your 3 points you can get for the using of the documents. Remember, the primary point of the DBQ is to prove how you're able to use primary sources and put them together to construct a cohesive essay or a cohesive argument. So the first point you can get is for describing 3 of the documents. If you sort of provide a summary of the documents and, you know, give anything about how they tie back into the question, for 3 of those, you'll get 1 point. You can't just quote the documents. You can't just pull out snippets. You have to actually be able to describe what the document is saying or how it ties in. You can get a second point for using 6 of those documents to support your argument. So this is going beyond describing. This is taking the content of the document and then turning around and very clearly tying it back into your thesis and showing how that document supports the argument that you've made. And the third point for document use you can get is by explaining the significance of 3 of the documents in terms of its point of view, its purpose, its audience, or its context. So for point of view, for instance, you might have a document from a governor of a colony or of a state, and if you explain how that person's position shapes their viewpoint or shapes what they said, you'd get credit for point of view. Purpose is, you know, why did this person say this, or why was this document constructed? If it was an advertisement to get people to move to a colony, you know, you need to explain, you know, that's what the purpose of the document was. Audience, who were they trying to persuade? Who was the author of this document trying to reach when they wrote it or when they said it? And historical context, kind of bigger picture, what's going on, that sort of explains, you know, simply put, the context of that document. So if there's a wartime recruitment poster, if you said, you know, this occurs during World War II when more people were needed for the war effort, that kind of thing, if you explain that out, that could be an example of context. So to get all 3 document use points, you have to describe at least 3 of the documents, use at least 6 of them to support your argument, and then explain or source 3 of them. The final 2 points come here. One is for outside evidence. If you include at least one thing in the essay that is relevant to the question and not part of the documents, and it's not part of your sourcing of the documents, you can get what's called the outside evidence point. My recommendation is to put at least one piece of outside information in each body paragraph and make sure you explain it to ensure that you get the point. You can't do what I've referred to often as a drive-by, where you just name drop something like a battle or a person. You actually have to explain why that's germane to your argument that you're making in this essay. And then finally, the new point this year on the rubric is the historical complexity point. And this is where you can show that you have a complex, nuanced understanding of this question. And you can do that in a number of different ways. You can extend the question by going into similarities and differences between something, assuming it wasn't already a comparison question. You can talk about cause and effect, and, you know, show connections between different events. You can show connections between different time periods or themes in the course that we talk about. That was previously known as synthesis. If you've taken another AP history course, that's the old synthesis point. You can still do that to get the point, but it's not hard and fast required now like it used to be. You can look at counter arguments and say, well, you know, here's my argument, but some people would argue this, and show that you understand both sides of an argument about a historical topic. And there's some other ways to get that point as well that we'll sort of go into throughout the year, but the important thing to remember is that what you're doing trying to get that point is just showing a complex, nuanced, detailed understanding of the question that you're answering. Finally, this is the format that I like to use for outlines when we outline a DBQ. A lot of times in this course we won't write the entire essay out. We'll simply do an outline to help with organization, and then maybe we'll, you know, do certain parts instead of writing a whole essay. Like maybe sometimes we'll just do the thesis, or sometimes we'll just look at sourcing documents, that kind of thing. But when I ask you to do an outline, this is the format you should use. So, you know, reference this often. Take a screenshot of this if you need to, so that you know what you're doing when you are asked to do an outline for a DBQ. So start off, do your contextualization, kind of just jot some things down about that, and then your thesis statement. What I like for you to do is write out your entire thesis statement. longhand. Okay, have the whole thing there. That's going to guide you as you go along in the rest of the process. For contextualization, if you want to bullet point a few things, I don't really have a problem with that, but write the thesis statement out long. For each body paragraph, write your topic sentence all the way out, and then put which documents you're going to use to support your argument and any outside information that you're going to include there as well. And you repeat that for each body paragraph. Then the conclusion, work your historical complexity in. If you couldn't work it in already, sometimes you can fold it into a body paragraph. Sometimes you don't really get to that maybe, but you can do that in the conclusion if all else fails. And always restate your argument or your thesis at the end, just to make sure the reader knows what you have argued. And that also, may assist you in the case that maybe your introductory thesis didn't quite get the job done. Maybe you'll say something a little bit different in the conclusion that drives the point home for you. So that will do it for now. Reference this video as needed. Bookmark it if you need to. And as always, if you're one of my students, feel free to ask me any questions or leave comments below. Cheers.